Since the dawn of civilization, music has always been an indispensable part of children's education. Today, in most countries around the world, music courses are still offered in schools as part of the basic curriculum. The ancient Greeks believed that they should be performed alongside mathematics and physics, as these subjects complement and enhance one another. Researchers at The Ohio State University conducted a retrospective study on the behavior of children, mainly high school students who had been exposed to music courses in their early years or throughout their school life. The presence of music in adolescent education has a significant impact on their ability to understand complex concepts such as mathematics or physics.
Mural projects are an increasingly popular form of public art that transforms outdoor spaces into public art galleries. Our research explored this intersection of public space, public art, and public memory through the Big Wash-Up. Using a technique called reverse graffiti, the project created dozens of outdoor murals. Their focus on local themes and characters celebrated community, identity, heritage, and memory. The process simultaneously honored community memories while creating new shared memories.
My son is unable to attend school. On the previous night, I found he was sick, and now I think it is better for him not to go to school so that we can avoid infection. I believe after some rest, he will become well and will successfully pass his exam. And I am happy to help him catch up on the missed lessons. Based on collaborative research by Arizona's top business schools, this study of leadership and company performance uncovers the effects of leadership driven by profits, cost control, and maintaining market share versus leadership driven more by balancing employee relations and development, customer or client needs, and the welfare of the greater community. Together, Mary Sully DeLuc, Assistant Professor of Management and Research Fellow at Thunderbird School of Global Management, and David Waldman, Director of the Center for Responsible Leadership at ASU's School of Global Management and Leadership, have found that maintaining a specific focus on earnings in decision-making can have negative effects on how a leader is viewed.
The Oakham Area Career Program offers on-site in-house teaching. The course is taught by experienced instructors rather than outsourcing it. Our teachers understand each student's individual learning needs, meaning learners receive personalized feedback and support. This way, you'll never miss a class, for any reason.
The alpine newt is native to much of central continental Europe and occurs up the coasts of northeast France through to Holland, but it does not appear to have been native to the British Isles, as its name suggests. It can be found in montane habitats up to 2,500 meters in altitude, but it can also be abundant in lowlands, and it will use a variety of water bodies, including both shallow and deep ponds and slow-flowing streams.
When humans began farming some 12,000 years ago, they altered the future of our species forever. Our ancestors were ecological pioneers, discovering and cultivating the most valuable crops, scaling them up to feed entire communities, and transforming wild crops so fundamentally that they became dependent on humans for their survival. Farming, in the words of National Geographic's Genographic Project, sowed the seeds for the modern age.
It is understandable that the government would look outside of Medicare to get the efficiency-related revolutions it wants. If Medicare was capable of delivering those changes, it would have already done so. Finding another organization that can deliver these services at a reduced cost with increased functionality, especially to the consumer of these services, makes absolute sense. The objections to making such a move will be about the potential loss of jobs from Medicare. Given how labor-intensive the current system is, this will be a genuine concern, but one that is facing all industries dealing with modernization through improved technology.
UWS graduates, Rutger Aboud and Anna Ford, whose story first appeared in GradLife in December 2009, have successfully risen through the ranks to be appointed associates at leading Western Sydney law firm, Coleman Grigg Lawyers. The promotion marks the culmination of many years of hard work for these legal regals, who are the first to rise to this level from the firm's cadet lawyer program with UWS. Digital media and the internet have made the sharing of texts, music, and images easier than ever, and the enforcement of copyright restriction harder. This situation has encouraged the growth of IP law and prompted increased industrial concentration on extending and policing IP protection, while also leading to the growth of an open access or Creative Commons movement, which challenges such control of knowledge and creativity.
First impressions based on facial appearance predict many important social outcomes. We investigated whether such impressions also influence the communication of scientific findings to lay audiences, a process that shapes public beliefs, opinion, and policy. First, we investigated the traits that engender interest in a scientist's work and those that create the impression of a good scientist who does high-quality research. Apparent competence and morality were positively related to both interest and quality judgments, whereas attractiveness boosted interest but decreased perceived quality. Next, we had members of the public choose real science news stories to read or watch, and found that people were more likely to choose items that were paired with interesting-looking scientists, especially when selecting video-based communications. Finally, we had people read real science news items and found that the research was judged to be of higher quality when paired with researchers who look like good scientists. Our findings offer insights into the social psychology of science and indicate a source of bias in the dissemination of scientific findings to broader society. Serving on a jury is normally compulsory for individuals who are qualified for jury service. A jury is intended to be an impartial panel capable of reaching a verdict. There are often procedures and requirements, including a fluent understanding of the language and the opportunity to test jurors' neutrality, or otherwise exclude jurors who are perceived as likely to be less than neutral or partial to one side.
Many people like to learn a new language. Exciting as it sounds, to achieve the proficiency, it can take a lot of efforts. There are multiple stages before a person can be said to be a language expert. First of all, the person should set a few short-term goals and narrow the focus on the most basic part. Every language uses grammar, which creates its skeleton. If a person learns the grammar, it's half job done. After that, learning to use the right words is very important, because a word can be used in a variety of connotations at different places. Having a pal or a friend who speaks that language makes the task easier, so that errors could be rectified instantly. When you understand at least 40% of the words and sentences, listening to the programs and news in that language can also help immensely. All in all, it's about the dedication and efforts taken with the right techniques.
In the past, before the discovery of aeroplanes, people used to travel using hot air balloons. Although it was not a very safe option in the beginning, it was an efficient means of transport. There were no roads or quickest means of travel for people, so they took a risk of traversing in the air using this heated air vessel. Helium and hydrogen were used later on as an improvement to the earlier design. The structure was very aerodynamic, and it works on the principle of displacement of air. Many kinds of materials were used in the beginning, such as paper, plastic, and even animal skin. The discovery of hot air balloon was accidental, as people were traditionally used to flying sky lantern. Nowadays, the technology is so advanced, and it is still used in the remote areas where there are no roads built yet.
British doctors have been urged to use simple language when communicating with their patients, says the BBC. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges says very often correspondence contains complex medical jargon rather than plain and simple English. Using a phrase twice daily to explain the dosing of a medicine is better than Latin abbreviation BD. The Please Write to Me initiative is aimed basically at doctors working in outpatient clinics, although it is the best practice for all clinicians who need to write clinical letters, and they are being asked to write directly to patients, rather than sending them a copy of a letter to their GP. The Academy suggests any medical words should be translated in plain English.
It was a busy old time at London Zoo this week, reports the Daily Mail, where over 19,000 animals were having their annual weight and height checked. Some creatures, such as rhinos, tigers, and okapis, had to be coaxed onto specially constructed larger scales. The statistics are shared with other zoos across the world to allow keepers to compare information about endangered species. The zoological manager, named Mark Habban, said, "We have to know the vital statistics of each animal at the zoo, however big or small." One of the best studied applications of plasmonic materials is sensors for detecting chemical and biological agents. In one approach, researchers coat a plasmonic nanomaterial with a substance that binds to a molecule of interest, say a bacterial toxin. In the absence of the toxin, light shining on the material is re-emitted at a specific angle. But if the toxin is present, it will alter the frequency of the surface plasmon and, thus consequently, the angle of the reflected light. This effect can be measured with great accuracy, enabling even trace amounts of the toxin to be detected and measured.
Training does not improve the ability to multitask. In 2009, A.L. Ophir, and then at Stanford University, and his colleagues discovered that multitasking on the internet paradoxically makes users less effective at switching from one task to another. They are less able to allocate their attention and are too vulnerable to distractions. Consequently, even members of the digital native generation are unlikely to develop the cognitive control needed to divide their time between various tasks or to instantly jump from one activity to another. In other words, digital multitasking does little more than produce a dangerous illusion of competence.
Event management is particularly challenging from an operational viewpoint. In many cases, events are staged on sites where everything has been set up over a 24-hour period with all elements carefully synchronized. In contrast, many events are years in the planning. Large convention bids are often won 5 years before the event is held. For the very competitive bidding process, budgets need to be developed and prices quoted, requiring a good understanding of market, economic, and political trends, as well as consumer choices. This long-term view is the basis of strategic management, which is covered in Part 1 and focuses on the event concept, feasibility of the event, legal compliance, and financial management. Marketing is a critical success factor and other important topic of this first section. Many events, sporting, cultural, and arts, involving long-term sponsorship, arrangements with key industry players. Relationship building is particularly challenging since there are so many stakeholders involved in events, including government agencies at many levels. Part I will look at all these aspects, including strategic risk, before moving on to the second part where operational planning and implementation will be covered in detail.
There are many different ways to help other people. Perhaps the most common of these involves giving others practical help. In our society, there are many individuals who spontaneously help others in this way. Additionally, there are others who belong to organizations which have been set up to provide help to specific groups, such as the elderly, the disabled, and those with serious physical or mental health problems. Most importantly, there are many occupations such as nursing, occupational therapy, and social work, which involve professionals who are trained to provide or organize practical help for others. And while helping other people in a practical way, many volunteer and professional helpers also make use of some counseling skills. These skills can be very useful in enabling people to feel better, as described in this book and our book, Counseling Skills in Everyday Life. However, it needs to be recognized that just being able to make use of some counseling skills does not qualify a person as a counselor.
Founded after World War II by 51 peace-loving states combined to oppose future aggression, the United Nations now counts 192 member nations, including its newest members, Nauru, Kiribati, and Tonga in 1999, Tuvalu and Yugoslavia in 2000, Switzerland and East Timor in 2002, and Montenegro in 2006. United Nations Day has been observed on October 24th since 1948 and celebrates the objectives and accomplishments of the organization, which was established on October 24th, 1945. The UN engages in peacekeeping and humanitarian missions across the globe. Though some say its influence has declined in recent decades, the United Nations still plays a tremendous role in world politics. In 2001, the United Nations and Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the UN, won the Nobel Peace Prize for their work for a better organized and more peaceful world. Since 1948, there have been 63 UN peacekeeping operations. 16 are currently underway. Thus far, close to 130 nations have contributed personnel at various times. 119 are currently providing peacekeepers. As of August 31, 2008, there were 16 peacekeeping operations underway with a total of 88,230 personnel. The SM all-island nation of Fiji has taken part in virtually every UN peacekeeping operation, as has Canada.
The long-term goal can be divided into short-term goals that are realistic and achievable. For example, in order to achieve a high grade, you need to set short-term objectives, such as studying regularly, completing assignments on time, and actively participating in class. Achieving these short-term goals along the way will help you reach your long-term goal. And timely action on feedback also plays an important role in this process.
Charlie Watts, the London-born Rolling Stones drummer who propelled the band's sound for nearly 60 years, died at the age of 80. Watts is regarded as one of the greatest and most stylish rock drummers of all time. He was a member of the Rolling Stones since January 1963, when he joined Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Brian Jones in their fledgling group. Watts helped them become one of the bands who took rock and roll to the spawning point in the 1960s, with classics like Satisfaction or Sympathy of the Devil. Sirhan, the assassin of U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, was granted parole on Friday after two of Kennedy's sons spoke in favor of Sirhan's release, and lawyers declined to argue that he should stay in jail. The decision was a major victory for the 77-year-old man who spent 53 years in prison. However, it doesn't guarantee he is free. Douglas Kennedy, who was a toddler when his father was gunned down in 1968, said he was moved to tears by Sirhan's remorse, and he should be released if he's not a threat to others. The narrative of law and order is located fundamentally at the level of individual guilt and responsibility. Criminal acts are seen as individual issues of personal responsibility and culpability, to which the state responds by way of policing, prosecution, adjudication, and punishment. This is but one level at which crime and criminal justice can be analyzed. The problem is that so often analysis ends there, at the level of individual action, characterized in terms of responsibility, guilt, evil. In few other areas of social life does individualism have this hold. To take but one instance, it would be absurd to restrict analysis of obesity to individual greed. It should similarly be widely seen as absurd to restrict analysis of criminal justice issues to the culpability of individuals.
From the mid-1890s, a race was on between the merchant navies of the recently unified Germany, Britain, and France. That race was to make the most luxurious and fastest ocean liners. And it started with the Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse, the first of 14 four-stackers built between 1897 and 1921. The large vessels that followed each tried to outdo the previous one in terms of size and interior design. Using many of the most famous of interior designers, every part of the new ships was designed, from the cutlery to the china, from the furniture to the paneling, and from the bedrooms to the boat decks. Through Kronprinzessin, Sicily, Mauritania, Aquitania, Olympic, Titanic, Imperator, Vaterland, Ile-de-France, and Paris, the development and design of the ships grew grander and more luxurious. The process continued into the 1930s, with the Empress of Britain and the fabulously Art Deco Normandy, the finest and most expensive liner ever built, and designed to be a showcase for all that was France, as well as with the Queen Mary, a rather more traditional vessel, but one, nonetheless, which pushed the boundaries of design away from the traditional country house look of the Edwardian era. Each new vessel brought with it the finest of interiors, from the plush and palatial to the modern look of the time. Even today, the influence of these floating palaces can still be seen in vessels such as Cunard's Queen Mary II, and the multitude of new cruise vessels, all vying for the public's interest and affection. The large liners were truly floating palaces, and here William H. Miller brings together a collection of fabulous images of the finest ships ever built, showcasing the style and elegance of a time when getting there was half the fun.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, or nightmare millions of honeybees, suddenly dying off, their bodies never found. Scientists have named the phenomenon colony collapse disorder, but they aren't united on the reason. Theories abound as to the cause of the mass die-off, ranging from the unlikely, cell phones affecting bees' navigational abilities, to the more plausible, though still debated, widespread pesticide use.
A peaceful environment plays a critical role in fostering a positive and productive atmosphere for education. When learners are surrounded by a supportive environment, They feel safe and secure, which enhances their ability to concentrate on their studies. A lack of distractions and disturbances also ensures that both teachers and students can engage meaningfully in the learning process. Furthermore, a calm and respectful atmosphere among classmates promotes cooperation and mutual support, which are vital for personal development. Thus, achieving a peaceful setting is essential for attaining educational excellence.
It is important to emphasize the need for hard work as an essential part of studying law, because far too many students are tempted to think that they can succeed by relying on what they imagine to be their natural ability, without bothering to add the expenditure of effort. To take an analogy, some people prefer the more or less instant gratification which comes from watching television adaptation of a classic novel to the rather more laborious process of reading the novel itself. Those who prefer watching television to reading the book are less likely to study law successfully unless they rapidly acquire a taste for text-based materials.
Our program will develop your theoretical knowledge of computer science and your problem solving and analytical skills while enabling you to achieve the ultimate qualification for the IT professional. The program structure is extremely flexible, enabling you to personalize your MSc through a wide range of electives.
After years in the wilderness, the term artificial intelligence (AI) seems poised to make a comeback. AI was big in the 1980s but vanished in the 1990s. It re-entered public consciousness with the release of Al, a movie about a robot boy. This has ignited public debate about AI, but the term is also being used once more within the computer industry. Researchers, executives, and marketing people are now using the expression without irony or inverted commas. And it is not always hype. The term is being applied with some justification to products that depend on technology that was originally developed by AI researchers. Admittedly, the rehabilitation of the term has a long way to go, and some firms still prefer to avoid using it. But the fact that others are starting to use it again suggests that AI has moved on from being seen as an overambitious and underachieving field of research.
Modern developments in areas such as neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and evolutionary psychology have resulted in new ways of thinking about human nature. Can we explain the mind and consciousness in terms of brain function? Can we understand modern human behavior as our evolutionary heritage? Is science even the right place to start if we want to understand human nature? Come along to the great debate. Hear the arguments and have your say.
After centuries of inequality in UK higher education benefiting men, there has been a reversal over the past 3 decades. A lower proportion of entrants to UK higher education institutions are male than ever before, and they make up less than 1/2 of the total. Other developed countries have undergone a similar shift. Male underachievement is not seen only in the figures for entry, but also in non-continuation dropout rates and degree performance statistics.
In the process of studying these techniques, I learned something remarkable, that there's far more potential in our minds than we often give them credit for. I'm not just talking about the fact that it's possible to memorize lots of information using memory techniques. I'm talking about a lesson that is more general and in a way much bigger. That it's possible with training and hard work to teach oneself to do something that might seem really difficult. An American retail giant is set to ask its suppliers to measure and report their greenhouse gas emissions. There is a need to disclose business emission. The data of emission can be used to test which company causes climate change and conflate the government campaigners and environmental invigilators.
Hippocrates allowed observation, rationality, and his own genuine respect for his patients to guide his practice. Using the scientific method, he carefully recorded his patients' symptoms and responses to treatments and used the data gathered to evaluate and prescribe the most successful regimens. His prestige as a great medical practitioner, educator, and author helped spread these ideals of rational medicine throughout the ancient world.
Barred owls can be found in dense forests right across North America. They feed on SM all mammals, fish, birds, and SM all reptiles, pretty much anything that comes their way. The barred owl grows up to half a meter tall and has emerged as a very adaptable nocturnal predator. And whereas they have been long thought to live in old-growth forests, they are now building up quite an urban population. In Charlotte, North Carolina, barred owls tend to nest in the cavities of the numerous willow oak trees that line the city's streets. Far from being endangered, the owls have expanded their range, and now, in some places, conservationists are worried about the effects they might have on other native species.
It is difficult to estimate the exact number of devices in circulation, but the government regularly surveys households. Many people continue to buy new gadgets and then quickly sell their old electronic devices, from mobile phones to snowmobiles.
Some of the most basic organisms are smarter than we thought. Rather than moving about randomly, amoebas and plankton employ sophisticated strategies to look for food and might travel in a way that optimizes their foraging. Immediately after an amoeba turned right, it was twice as likely to turn left as right again, and vice versa. They told a meeting of the American Physical Society meeting in Denver, Colorado last week. This suggests that the cells have a rudimentary memory, being able to remember the last direction they had just turned in.
Experiments are designed to test hypotheses under controlled conditions, where it is relatively easy to measure variables while keeping other factors constant. By ensuring that all other conditions remain stable, researchers can reliably identify cause and effect relationships.
Sports were firstly part of survival skills, tightly linked to human existence, but now they are mainly for recreational purposes and enjoyment. For example, swimming, hunting, and fishing were originally necessary for food, but today they have evolved into popular competitive sports. Some of them are actually seen as global competitions, attracting millions of spectators.
Universities have always been connected with political societies, and in many countries, the student union provides a forum for debate and for discussion. The accommodation in which students want to live in is one that reflects their ideals. There is so much opportunity in university for students to pursue their interests.
The world of species is tricky, in which it is often fatal for insects to be exposed, and they have to conceal themselves in order to survive. For predators, nothing is less appetizing than what appears to be a dead prey. This camouflage mechanism only works effectively when the insect stays completely still, often remaining hidden until the danger has passed.
The lens in the human eye works much like the lens in a camera. Just as a camera adjusts its focus, the lens changes its shape to bend and focus the light a second time, ensuring that you have a clear and precise image of whatever you are looking at. Whether the object is close or far away, the lens adapts accordingly. Structurally, the lens is made up of water and protein, which together allow it to remain transparent and flexible throughout much of life.
Is it a glimpse of a dystopian future or just a common sense approach to technology? Either way, Gatwick Airport's newest hotel offers something different, a vision of a post-employee economy where tasks are automated by a computer. At Block, a hotel of 245 rooms, there are just 2 members of staff on duty. Despite its unglamorous location in a renovated office block above the airport's south terminal, Block has grand plans to shake up the hotel industry. Thanks to a partnership with Korean technology giant Samsung, almost everything here can be controlled by smartphone. Once guests have made a reservation online, they are given a code that can be used to log into an app, enabling them to check in without standing at a reception desk. In the room, the phone can operate the air conditioning, switch on lights, turn on TVs, and open blackout blinds. Even keys have been rendered obsolete. Guests can unlock the door to their room using their phone, with something called near-field communication technology. At the end of their stay, checkout is also done via the app, meaning that guests can complete their entire stay without speaking a single word to a member of staff. We believe anyone can excel with the right foundation. By understanding the basis of information setting for knowledge, such as coding and other skills, participants gain essential expertise. Through 9 to 12 projects, you will build your portfolio, and upon completing the program, you will have a robust showcase of your abilities.
The older you get, the more your responsibilities increase. Your commitment to your family and work grows, leaving you with less time for play and recreation. Neglecting recreation is a disservice to yourself, as it is essential for well-being. This can lead to burnout and fatigue. Remember, playing isn't just for kids, it's for adults too.
We invite parents to participate in a program held 3 times a year. The details of the program will be posted on our website. We expect parents to attend so that their children can succeed.
While many businesses struggle to adapt in today's competitive market, only a few have managed to truly thrive. Those that succeed often work alongside innovative partners who help facilitate growth through collaboration and shared resources. Thriving in such environments requires not only resilience, but also the ability to adapt and work effectively alongside others.
This museum restaurant is a perfect place to have a party. You can have a party of 20 to 25 people. More people are possible, and prices start at $45.
Make sure your shipping envelopes are clean and dry. And remember to remove any paper shipping labels prior to dropping off. Paper labels are detrimental to the store drop-off recycling process. If the labels don't peel off easily, you can cut them off with scissors.
I feel about the opportunity to take on new challenges and contribute to the team. While I was working at my previous job, I gained valuable experience that I believe will be beneficial in this role. I am eager to take a position at your esteemed company, and I am confident that my skills and experience make me a strong candidate. Please let me know if there are any additional steps I need to take or information I need to provide. I am looking forward to your response.
The Kuipers Library is a research library in Amsterdam's famous Rijksmuseum. It is the oldest and largest of its kind in the country and aesthetically astounding. However, despite the streams of tourists that flow through the museum, far too few seem to trickle into its remarkable reading room. The 19th century library, which has recently been restored, has been collecting content since 1885. Its shelves are stocked with manuscripts bound to entice any art history lover. While browsing its extensive collection, you'll come across books, journals, and periodicals, as well as catalogs about art auctions, exhibitions, trades, and collections. Following its renovations, the museum opened the library's reading room to visitors. Tourists, students, and art historians alike are welcome to delve into its rich collection. Tables on the ground floor allow people to hunker down with their research materials, surrounded by the library's aesthetically astounding walls of books.
Robotic surgery allows the entire procedure to be recorded, helping to preserve detailed surgical information. This creates a valuable tool for training, giving students and professionals the chance to learn from real operations. It also enables doctors to operate remotely, a technique known as telesurgery.
Employees should adhere to regulations that define conditions of the working environment to ensure a safe and healthy workplace. These measures are intended to minimize hazards in the workplace. In some countries, companies are required to purchase insurance to protect employees' rights and interests. Three types of phthalates, chemical additives that render hard plastics flexible, will be banned from children's toys and childcare products starting February 10th, while three other types of phthalates will be temporarily prohibited from childcare products and toys that can be placed in a child's mouth. Consumer advocates complain that the law has ended up sanctioning a grace period that allows toy makers to sell off soon-to-be banned toys rather than forcing them to dispose of them.
The supply of a thing, in the phrase supply and demand, is the amount that will be offered for sale at each of a series of prices. The demand is the amount that will be bought at each of a series of prices. The principle that value depends on supply and demand means that in the case of nearly every commodity, more will be bought if the price is lowered, less will be bought if the price is raised. Therefore, sellers, if they wish to induce buyers to take more of a commodity than they are already doing, must reduce its price. If they raise its price, they will sell less. If there is a general falling off in demand, due, say, to trade depression, sellers will either have to reduce prices or put less on the market. They will not be able to sell the same amount at the same price. Similarly, with supply. At a certain price, a certain amount will be offered for sale. At a higher price, more will be offered. At a lower price, less. If consumers want more, they must offer a higher price. If they want less, they will probably be able to force prices down. That is the first result of a change in demand or supply.
The universality of story feature films are narratives they tell stories. Even films based on true events will fictionalize them in order to produce drama, to telescope time, to avoid being filled up with too many minor characters, or simply to be more entertaining. Even in the current welter of special effect movies, feature films are usually summarized by their plots, in their first treatment or outline of the script idea, in the advanced publicity, in the TV guide, in reviews, and in conversations. Films may differ from other kinds of narrative literary fiction or television drama, for instance, in the medium used and the representational conventions. They do, however, share with literary fiction and television drama the basic structure and functions of narrative. Much work has been done by researchers in the field known as narratology on exactly what constitutes the structures and functions of the narrative. Their conclusions are of great use to students of the feature film.
Whether you want to exercise and stay fit, train professionally with like-minded people, or indulge your competitive streak, Trinity Sport and Fitness has it covered. We've got a dedicated support development team on campus to support every student taking part in sports. You might want to participate in sports competitions, volunteer with a local sports class, or simply play for fun with our social sport program. Trinity Fitness members of our public-facing sports facility will also entitle you to discounts when you are booking a sports facility and fitness class. You will also get an opportunity to benefit from tailored personal training, free activities, events, and lots more.
In an era where our dependence on fossil fuels threatens the very planet we inhabit, green energy initiatives have sprung up worldwide. Governments across the globe have established stringent criteria and certification processes for producers of green energy. These standards, recognized by international environmental organizations, ensure that renewable energy sources are harnessed in an eco-friendly manner. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated the shift to remote work, transforming work culture. While it offers flexibility and the chance to cut down on commuting-related emissions, concerns about burnout and maintaining work-life balance persist. Companies are now exploring hybrid models to combine the best of both worlds.
Sleep. Deprivation is a global issue in all the major cities around the world where the amount of sleep is decreasing over decades. Now, the decrease is growing with the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic. Stress plays a major role in how we sleep. People are meant to have some kind of routines, and many people lost them during the pandemic and especially during lockdowns. People woke up and went to sleep at odd times, they ate at odd times, and all of that definitely affected their biological rhythms.
Studies of pine martens in Scotland have shown that the diet varies seasonally, with SML mammals, berries in late summer-autumn, and SML birds being the main foods. Recent work on a plantation has shown that martens establish their home ranges in areas dominated by forests and dense shrubs. Within home ranges, martens utilize areas of grassy vegetation within the forest, which are typically associated with Microtus voles, for which a strong selective preference over other SML mammals is shown.
When that happens, staff will help the person, strung out, and now a little stressed, fish their drugs out of the rubbish. On their way out, they might have a blood test, their first dental checkup in years, or just a hot cup of Mila. We enable people to inject in the center because that's what they do, the medical director, Nico Clark, tells Guardian Australia during a recent visit to the North Richmond Community Health Centre. The majority are dependent on their substances. The purpose is not to be a place that facilitates injection per se. The purpose is to keep people alive. The centre is a response to a coroner's report that noted the heroin-related deaths in the area in 2016.
Complementary therapies, such as those practiced by naturopaths, chiropractors, and acupuncturists, have become increasingly popular in Australia over the last few decades. Interest initially coincided with enthusiasm for alternative lifestyles, while immigration and increased contact and trade with China have also had an influence. The status of complementary therapies is being revisited in a number of areas: legal regulation, the stances of doctors' associations, their inclusion in medical education, and scientific research into their efficacy.
Trees, as ever, are or should be at the heart of all discussions on climate change. The changes in carbon dioxide, in temperature, and in patterns of rainfall will each affect them in many ways, and each parameter interacts with all the others. So between them, these three main variables present a bewildering range of possibilities.
The University of Maryland boasts 78 academic programs, ranked in the top 25 nationally, and 29 academic programs in the top 10, according to US News and World Report. By drawing top-notch faculty, attracting the brightest students, and investing in the quality of our academic programs, we are a force to reckon with on a national basis.
Research is a process of investigation, leading to new insights effectively shared, and is central to the purpose of any university. Students have the right to be taught by acknowledged experts in their field, which requires that staff members operate at the most advanced level appropriate to their discipline and level. Research is therefore crucial to a positive student experience from further education to doctoral development.
Researchers suggest the following tips as you begin to network: seek common ground, engage with your network regularly and consistently, apply yourself to making your network work or it will wither. It is a skill that you need to practice, not a talent. Eutrophication is a process when bodies of water accumulate to a high nutrient level due to extensive fertilizer in the soil. The water becomes overly enriched with minerals and nutrients, which induce excessive blooms of algae and other aquatic species, which may deplete minerals in the water and thus endanger other species. E-learning is the new way forward. We believe passionately in e-learning. Our innovative approach opens up new opportunities for busy professionals that simply did not previously exist. The chance to combine a prestigious master's program with a demanding professional and personal life. Our SML virtual classrooms facilitate intensive interaction and collaboration among professionals from all over the world.
The recipe for making any creature is written in its DNA. So last November, when geneticists published the near-complete DNA sequence of the long-extinct woolly mammoth, there was much speculation about whether we could bring this behemoth back to life. Creating a living, breathing creature from a genome sequence that exists only in a computer's memory is not possible right now. But someone someday is sure to try it, predicts Stephen Schuster, a molecular biologist at Pennsylvania State University, University Park, and a driving force behind the Mammoth Genome Project.
With the increase in women's participation in the labor force, many mothers have less time available to undertake domestic activities. At the same time, there has been increasing recognition that the father's relationship with the child is important. A father can have many roles in the family, ranging from income provider to teacher, carer, and playmate. Therefore, balancing paid work and family responsibilities can be an important issue for both fathers and mothers in families.
Carbon prices in the European Union also reached their highest level in a decade this summer, following a series of reforms meant to limit the oversupply of credits and expand many industries subjected to the cap. The biggest development of all may be in China, the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, which has taken steps toward its own emissions trading program. China's move has the potential to narrow the gap between global carbon prices and climate costs to 63% in the early 2020s, OECD found.
At the end of the last ice age, the melting ice disrupted the ocean currents in the North Atlantic and caused a drop in temperature of almost 5 degrees. Even though the rest of the planet was warming up, the North Atlantic region remained in a cold period for 1,300 years. The same thing happened around 8,000 years ago when the cooling lasted about 100 years, and it could happen again today. Even a short period of cooling in the North Atlantic could have a dramatic effect on the wildlife and the human populations living there.
Electric eels are born to shock, thanks to cells called electrocytes, which, stacked like batteries, make up 80% of their bodies. These cunning South American hunters can deliver debilitating blows of up to 600 volts to their prey. But they've harnessed their electricity to pack even bigger punches. Last year, Vanderbilt University biologist Kenneth Catania revealed electric eels bring their positively charged head and negatively charged tail closer together to generate a more powerful current.
Having tracked down research that is relevant to your area of interest, the next task is to actually make sense of that research. This section is intended to show you how to be critical of the research you are reviewing and how to check that the evidence is credible and represented appropriately. Unfortunately, this means discussing the ways in which research findings may be misrepresented.
Since Austria sits at a high elevation and spends a quarter of the year under snow, it should come as no surprise that heating is a matter of considerable importance in the country. What may be surprising, however, is that Vienna, a grand imperial city of music, art and history, actually boasts a museum dedicated specifically to heating systems.
These fascinating questions, and more, will be revealed by University of Manchester scientists when they take to the road on their brain bus. The bus is taking hands-on activities to test the senses to the suburbs, to show young and old alike how the brain works, and how science can answer some of life's most captivating questions. Organizer Dr. Stuart Allen, lecturer at the Faculty of Life Sciences, explains. 3-year-olds and upwards can understand the senses, and it's an area that is intriguing to all ages. It takes effort to get out of bed on a Saturday morning and go to the museum. We are bringing science to your doorstep and going further afield this year in the hope of finding new and different audiences. We want people to see that science is interesting as well as important in our lives, and to encourage people who may not consider it possible to go to university.
A koala rode 16 kilometers near Adelaide, Australia, inside an arch for a car wheel. The driver did not observe until he stopped and heard the animal making noise. A woman with an animal rescue organization said that it was incredible, but the koala was in shock. The organization took her straight to the vet. People named the koala Kelly after one of her rescuers and put the koala back into the wild. She quickly climbed up a tree and went to sleep. Koalas are a vulnerable species as there are less than 100,000 of them in the wild.
As research has shown, emotions are contagious, and empaths are especially sensitive to others' emotional energies because they're so attuned to others. They can get easily exhausted in crowds, be drawn into codependent relationships, exhaust themselves trying to solve others' problems, or burn out from too much caregiving. Yet empathy is also a gift that brings greater insight and understanding. Some of the finest therapists, doctors, nurses, professors, writers, designers, musicians, artists, and leaders in many have been empaths.
Education is generally considered to be a key factor in improving outcomes for Indigenous Australians, with many studies showing that improved health and socioeconomic status are directly linked to educational participation and achievement. There is a range of issues affecting participation in education for Indigenous Australians, including access to educational institutions, financial constraints, and community expectations.
The rest of Taylor's restaurant is student-run. Students in quantity food production and service management. Classes make the articulate and detailed dishes. We teach students to understand where a product comes from and to respect that product, Gami said. Skeptics might doubt the quality of a student-run restaurant, but one visit to Taylor's will immediately change their outlook. Dishes such as orecchiette and butternut squash, pappardelle with duck and bistro chicken will please any appetite while imparting the need to return for a second taste. Students are taught to use ratios and proportions rather than recipes when creating dishes. Understanding ratios and proportions when creating dishes instead of recipes makes students think and actually teaches them how to cook, rather than just reading a recipe and not learning from it, Gami said. Gami said he believes in using all aspects of a product, which Taylor's menu reflects.
In the rapidly evolving workplace, adopting innovative solutions for productivity has become paramount. Employees who engage in regular physical activity, for instance, tend to have higher levels of concentration, which directly impacts their output. Integrating technology that facilitates remote work can also lead to significant gains in productivity, as it allows employees to work flexibly and efficiently. Moreover, creating spaces that encourage collaboration, like communal areas for brainstorming, can foster a more dynamic and collaborative environment. Effective communication tools are crucial for maintaining synergy between team members, ensuring that projects are completed swiftly. Lastly, Companies that prioritize mental well-being in their policies often see an increase in employee satisfaction and retention.
The tomato is probably the most widely grown vegetable by the home gardener because of its food value, many uses, and relative ease of culture. Originating in Central and South America, the tomato was domesticated in Mexico. There are many related wild species in South America. Tomati was the name used by Native Americans.
With about 1.5 billion non-native speakers, English has become the world's own language. Such dominance has its downside, of course. There are now about 6,800 languages left in the world, compared with perhaps twice that number back at the dawn of agriculture. Thanks in part to the rise of Uber languages, most importantly English, the remaining languages are now dying at the rate of about one a fortnight. Want to learn Busuu, anyone? Then you'd better head to Cameroon fast, before one of the language's last 8 speakers kicks the bucket, as the Busuu niece presumably doesn't say.
Green spaces contribute significantly to a reduction of soil and aerial temperatures during spells of hot weather, so contributing to human well-being. In the garden context, there is, however, little information as to what extent various types of plants differ in their cooling potential and how certain planting combinations may maximize cooling under a scenario of low rainfall and minimal water inputs.
Michelle is the creator of the marshmallow test, one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology, which is often cited as evidence of the importance of self-control. In the original test, which was administered at the Bing Nursery School at Stanford in the 1960s, Michelle's team would present a child with a treat. Marshmallows were just one option, and tell her that she could either eat the one treat immediately or wait alone in the room for several minutes until the researcher returned, at which point she could have 2 treats. The promised treats were always visible, and the child knew that all she had to do to stop the agonizing wait was ring a bell to see all the experimenter back, although in that case, she wouldn't get the second treat. The longer a child delayed gratification, Michelle found that is, the longer she was able to wait, the better she would fare later in life at numerous measures of what we now see all executive function. She would perform better academically, earn more money, and be healthier and happier. She would also be more likely to avoid a number of negative outcomes, including jail time, obesity, and drug use.
Animals have played a major role in humans' lives throughout history. Today, scientific research is trying to discover the positive aspects of living with companion animals. Animals have been used as an alternative form of treatment for many years. More recently, it has been discovered that owning a pet can help lower people's blood pressure, enhance the chances of living after a heart attack, keep people more active, and provide more satisfaction with life. It is theorized that this happens because pets help people become more social, provide a means to give and receive affection, and help connect us with the natural world.
Egg-eating snakes are a SM-all group of snakes whose diet consists only of eggs. Some eat only SM-all eggs, which they have to swallow whole, as the snake has no teeth. Instead, some other snakes eat bigger eggs, but it requires special treatment. These snakes have spines that stick out from the backbone. The spines crack the egg open as it passes through the throat.
Well, the banana is the first cultivated fruit. It's one of the food items that literally brought people out of the jungle, out of their hunter-gatherer lifestyles, and was there at the dawn of agriculture, which is what helped force human beings into communities. It's really one of the things that helped invent human culture. It's about 7,000 years of history, and the banana, from its center of origin, which is believed to be Papua New Guinea, spread out with people who traveled in boats across the Pacific into the mainland of Asia and all the way south to Australia, across Indonesia and Micronesia. And eventually they moved as far as Africa and even possibly to Ecuador, all in this time. And all on paddle boats and wind-driven boats.
In England, it is well known that access to university, on average, varies substantially by the levels of parental income, and that students from poorer families access different types of universities than those from wealthier backgrounds. However, the question of whether graduates' earnings vary according to their socioeconomic backgrounds amongst graduates attending similar universities and taking the same subject has remained poorly understood, thus far limited by data availability. Our unique administrative database offers substantial advantages in addressing this crucial question. The findings are also relevant for myriad other issues that benefit from better information on variation in graduates' earnings, including students' choices of subjects and institutions, better information for schools to help advise and guide students whilst at school, and the operation and cost of the higher education finance system. The speed of sound, otherwise known as Mach 1, varies with temperature. At sea level on a standard day, the temperature is 59 F, and Mach 1 is approximately 761 miles per acre. As the altitude increases, the temperature and speed of sound both decrease until about 36,000 feet, after which the temperature remains steady until about 60,000 feet. Within that 36,000, 60,000 foot range, Mach 1 is about 661 miles per hour. Because of the variation, it is possible for an airplane flying supersonic at high altitude to be slower than a subsonic flight at sea level. The transonic band, the sound barrier, extends from around Mach 0.8 when the first supersonic shockwaves form on the wing to Mach 1.2 when the entire wing has gone supersonic.
High emotional intelligence can help a manager improve workplace communication skills, employee motivation, and organizational effectiveness. If a manager has high empathy, a key component of emotional intelligence, he or she will be able to listen to the concerns of employees and will be more understanding of their needs, wants, and concerns. This will most likely translate into increased motivation and satisfaction of employees, and ultimately will have a positive effect on the effectiveness of the business.
Of the more than 1,000 bat species worldwide, 22 are native to North America. And while there are no pollinator bats in our area, gardeners should champion those that do live here, because they're insectivorous. These bats consume moths, beetles, and mosquitoes, and can eat up to 500 mosquito-sized insects per hour. They also protect gardens and crops from such pests as cucumber beetles, cutworms, and leafhoppers.
While accounting focuses on the day-to-day management of financial reports and records across the business world, finance uses the same information to project future growth and to analyze expenditure in order to strategize company finances. By studying this major, you get to have a better insight on the market. With the right knowledge and skills acquired, you should be able then, when you graduate, to advise others in making strong investments. This major will help you gain responsibility of predicting and analyzing the potential for profit and growth, assessing monetary resources, utilizing accounting statistics and reports, and also looking externally for future funding options.
Dance has played an important role in many musicals. In some cases, dance numbers are included as an excuse to add to the color and spectacle of the show. But dance is more effective when it forms an integral part of the plot. An early example is Richard Rodgers' On Your Toes, 1936, in which the story about classical ballet meeting the world of jazz enabled dance to be introduced in a way that enhances rather than interrupts the drama.
In his theory of natural selection, Charles Darwin suggested that survival of the fittest was the basis for organic evolution, the change of living things with time. Evolution itself is a biological phenomenon common to all living things, even though it has led to their differences. Evidence to support the theory of evolution has come primarily from the fossil record and from comparative studies of structure and function.
In The Origin of Species, Darwin provided abundant evidence that life on Earth has evolved over time, and he proposed natural selection as the primary mechanism for that change. He observed that individuals differ in their inherited traits, and that selection acts on such differences, leading to evolutionary change. Although Darwin realized that variation in heritable traits is a prerequisite for evolution, he did not know precisely how organisms pass heritable traits to their offspring. Just a few years after Darwin published The Origin of Species, Gregor Mendel wrote a groundbreaking paper on inheritance in pea plants. In that paper, Mendel proposed a model of inheritance in which organisms transmit discrete heritable units, now called genes, to their offspring. Although Darwin did not know about genes, Mendel's paper set the stage for understanding the genetic differences on which evolution is based.
We now know through the work of neuroscientists that the human brain is wired to mimic other people, and this mimicry involves actual involuntary physiological experience in the observer. Human beings tend to imitate actions that they see. Physiologically, our brains include mirror neurons, which react to actions that are seen as if we are doing the action ourselves. It is largely an unconscious and automatic experience. When we hear people speak, observe their vocal nuances, watch their posture, gestures, and facial expressions, etc., neural networks in our brains are stimulated by the shared representations, generating feelings within us that reflect the experience of those we are observing. With the popularity of the gender equality campaign and the cultural change, the traditional roles of men as the earner and of women in which they stay at home are challenged today. Deciding to go to business school is perhaps the simplest part of what can be a complicated process. With nearly 600 accredited MBA programs on offer around the world, the choice of where to study can be overwhelming. Here we explain how to choose the right school and course for you and unravel the application and funding process. Probably the majority of people applying to business school are at a point in their careers where they know they want to shake things up, but they don't know exactly what they want to do with their professional lives, says Stacy Blackman, an MBA admissions consultant based in Los Angeles. If that's the case with you, look at other criteria: culture, teaching method, location, and then pick a place that is a good fit for you with a strong general management program. Super-defined career goals don't have to be a part of this process.
The classic era of Mayan. Civilization came to an end around 900 AD. Why this happened is unclear. The cities were probably over-farming the land, so that a period of drought led to famine. Recent geological research supports this, as there appears to have been a 200-year drought around this time.
Performance appraisals have traditionally been considered the best way to evaluate an employee's performance, but increasingly, organizations are finding them of little value. Employees find them stressful and unhelpful. Importantly, they also take up a lot of time. When Deloitte analyzed their own process, they found managers and employees spent around 2 million hours a year on performance reviews. A growing number of companies have decided to abolish performance reviews altogether, instead introducing more regular catch-ups.
Chemistry is an extremely important topic in physiology. Most physiological processes occur as the result of chemical changes that occur within the body. These changes include the influx of ions across a neuron's membrane, causing a signal to pass from one end to the other. Other examples include the storage of oxygen in the blood by a protein as it passes through the lungs for usage throughout the body. Higher education qualifications provide a substantial advantage in the labor market. Higher education graduates are less likely to be unemployed and tend to have higher incomes than those without such qualifications. Having a highly educated workforce can also lead to increased productivity and innovation and make Australia more competitive in the global market. Many tests have shown that, in a very broad way, peoples in most parts of the world have similar color preferences. Blue is the most preferred and popular hue, followed in order by red, green, purple, yellow, and orange. Overlying this basic order of color preference, however, are the responses of individuals, which of course vary widely and may also be very powerful. Children are likely to have strong preferences for some colors and aversions to others, but sometimes will not admit to them, since outside factors may be influential in determining both color preferences and the way that they are expressed or suppressed. Current fashions in clothes and accessories, gender stereotyping, and peer group pressure may all play a significant part. Boys in particular may be reluctant to admit to any strong preferences for colors, other than those of favorite football teams, because color awareness may be regarded by their peer group as feminine.
Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence comes it by that vast store which the busy and boundless fancy of man has painted on it with an almost endless variety? Whence has it all the materials of reason and knowledge? To this I answer in one word: from experience. In that all our knowledge is founded, and from that it ultimately derives itself. Discrimination against women has been alleged in hiring practices for many occupations, but it is extremely difficult to demonstrate sex-biased hiring. A change in the way symphony orchestras recruiting musicians provides an unusual way to test for sex-biased hiring. To overcome possible biases in hiring, most orchestras revised their audition policies in the 1970s and 1980s. A major change involved the use of blind auditions with a screen to conceal the identity of the candidate from the jury. Female musicians in the top 5 symphony orchestras in the United States were less than 5% of all players in 1970, but are 25% today. we ask whether women were more likely to be advanced and/or hired with the use of blind auditions. Using data from actual auditions in an individual fixed effects framework, we find that the screen increases by 50% the probability a woman will be advanced out of certain preliminary rounds. The screen also enhances by several folds the likelihood a female contestant will be the winner in the final round. Using data on orchestra personnel, the switch to blind auditions can explain between 30% and 55% of the increase in the proportion female among new hires and between 25% and 46% of the increase in the percentage female in the orchestras since 1970.
To better understand selfies and how people form their identities online, the researchers combed through 2.5 million selfie posts on Instagram to determine what kinds of identity statements people make by taking and sharing the photos. Nearly 52% of all selfies fell into the appearance category. Pictures of people showing off their makeup, clothes, lips, etc. Pics about looks were 2 times more popular than the other 14 categories combined. After appearances, social selfies with friends, loved ones, and pets were the most common, 14%. Then came ethnicity pics, 13%, travel, 7%, and health and fitness, 5%. The researchers noted that the prevalence of ethnicity selfies about a person's ethnicity, nationality, or country of origin, is an indication that people are proud of their backgrounds. They also found that most selfies are solo pictures rather than taken with a group. Overall, an overwhelming 57% of selfies on Instagram were posted by the 18 to 35-year-old crowd, something the researchers say isn't too surprising, considering the demographics of the social media platform. The under 18 age group posted about 30% of selfies. The older crowd, 35 plus, shared them far less frequently, 13%. Appearance was more popular among all age groups. Lead author Julia Deeb-Swihart says selfies are an identity performance, meaning that users carefully craft the way they appear online, and that selfies are an extension of that. This evokes William Shakespeare's famous line, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players."
Over the past 2 decades, around a third of the world's mangrove swamps have been converted for human use, with many turned into valuable shrimp farms. In 2007, an economic study of such shrimp farms in Thailand showed that the commercial profits per hectare were $9,632. If that were the only factor, conversion would seem an excellent idea. However, proper accounting shows that for each hectare, government subsidies formed $8,412 of this figure, and there were costs too. $1,000 for pollution and $12,392 for losses to ecosystem services. These comprised damage to the supply of foods and medicines that people had taken from the forest, the loss of habitats for fish, and less buffering against storms. And because a given shrimp farm only stays productive for 3 or 4 years, there was the additional cost of restoring them afterwards.
Almost no one regards corn with suspicion, but the same can't be said for humans' ingenious ability to engineer the plants we eat. Genetically modified, GM, crops are viewed with such hostility that they are barely grown in Europe. However, a new study by an independent group of scientists who have done the most comprehensive review of the evidence so far shows that our aversion to GM food is pointless, unscientific, and harmful to farmers. Seminars are not designed to be mini lectures. Their educational role is to provide an opportunity for you to discuss interesting and/or difficult aspects of the course. This is founded on the assumption that it is only by actively trying to use the knowledge that you have acquired from lectures and texts that you can achieve an adequate understanding of the subject. If you do not understand a point, it is highly unlikely that you will be the only person in the group in that position. You will invariably be undertaking a service for the entire group if you come to the seminar equipped with questions on matters which you feel you did not fully understand. The seminar is to provoke discussion.
Music was as important to the ancient Egyptians as it is in our modern society. Although it is thought that music played a role throughout the history of Egypt, those that study the Egyptian writings have discovered that music seemed to become more important in what is called the pharaonic period of their history. This was the time when the Egyptian dynasties of the pharaohs were established around 3100 BCE, and music was found in many parts of everyday Egyptian life.
No two siblings are the same, not even identical twins. Parents often puzzle about why their children are so different from one another. They will say, I brought them up all the same. They forget that what determines our behavior isn't what happens to us, but how we interpret what happens to us. And no two people ever see anything in exactly the same way.
An herbal is a book of plants, describing their appearance, their properties, and how they may be used for preparing ointments and medicines. The medical use of plants is recorded on fragments of papyrus and clay tablets from ancient Egypt, Samaria, and China that date back 5,000 years, but document traditions far older still. Over 700 herbal remedies were detailed in the Papyrus Ebers, an Egyptian text written in 1500 BC. Around 65 BC, a Greek physician called Dioscorides wrote an herbal that was translated into Latin and Arabic, known as De Medical. It became the most influential work on medicinal plants in both Christian and Islamic worlds until the late 17th century. An illustrated manuscript, copies of the text made in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, survives from the 6th century. The first printed herbals date from the dawn of European printing in the 1480s. They provided valuable information for apothecaries, whose job it was to make the pills and potions prescribed by physicians. In the next century, landmark herbals were produced in England by William Turner, considered to be the father of British botany, and John Girard, whose illustrations would inspire the floral fabric, wallpaper, and tile designs of William Morris 4 centuries later.
David Lynch is professor and head of education at Charles Darwin University. Prior to this, he was sub-dean in the Faculty of Education and Creative Arts at Central Queensland University and foundation head of the university's Noosa campus. David's career in education began as a primary school teacher in Queensland in the early 1980s and progressed to 4 principal positions before entering higher education. David's research interests predominate in teacher education, with particular interest in building teacher capability to meet a changed world.
Much has been said of the Latino vote in this election, which is something I know a little bit about, having been working obsessively over it for the last 16 years. Latinos are the fastest growing demographic with the largest voter registration cap in America. A Latino youth turns 18 every 30 seconds. While the mode for whites in America is 58, the mode for Latinx is 11 years old. You heard that right. And it's these new voters and the youth who are translating America for their immigrant families who are leading the charge for audacious change.
There are a number of substances, toxic as well as non-toxic, which are being added to the environment by natural events and human characteristics. These are, in fact, the undesirable consequences of modern civilization. These substances, which are continuously going into air, water, and soil, bring about undesirable changes in physical, chemical, and biological aspects of our environment and the life processes of animals and plants.
Active learning classrooms, ALCs, are student-centered, technology-rich classrooms. They easily identified with their large circular tables and movable seating designed to improve student engagement in class. Typically, each table is accompanied by a whiteboard and flat-screen monitor to display student work, and larger rooms frequently have miniature bulb and microphones at each table. In this way, students are able to signal if they have questions or want to speak to the entire room. One of the things that we are seeing is that we're seeing more young people run for office. And the more people start running for office, they realize that local government is what makes the most impact, at least here in America. So if you want, for example, some racial reform in your judicial system, vote for your district attorney, vote for your city councilman. If you think that there's disparities in our education system, run for your school board. So that's one. But the other thing to send very clearly to politicians is that when young Americans voted their heart out, young Latinos, youth in general, outvoted the people before them. But they're voting on making a bet that their life will change, because the last 4 years could not have been rockier.
"17 years ago, I walked through City H Hall for the first time as a staff member, and that walk revealed something to me. I was a unicorn. There weren't many people who looked like me that worked in the building, and yet there were folks committed to addressing hundreds of years of systemic inequity that left some behind and many ignored. Where there was promise, there was a huge problem. You see, democracy as it was originally designed had a fatal flaw. It only laid pipeline for rich white men to progress. Financial markets swung wildly yesterday in the frenzied trading market by further selling of equities and fears about an unraveling of the global carry trade. At the same time, trading in the US and European credit markets were exceptionally heavy for a third consecutive day. London trading was marked by particularly wild swings in the prices of credit derivatives used to insure investors against corporate defaults.
Sydney is becoming effective in making the best of its limited available unconstrained land. Sydney is suitable for integrating suitable business, office, residential, retail, and other development in accessible locations so as to maximize public transport, patronage, and encourage walking and cycling. Also, this city can reduce the consumption of land for housing and associated urban development on the urban fringe. For the proposed mixed business, mixed use and business park areas, there was no employment data available for comparable areas. It is also concluded that lack of housing supply will affect affordability in Sydney.
A surprising number of writers, even those who have thought of their writing as self-expression, have sought a freedom from the tyranny of subjectivity, echoing Goethe's claim that every healthy effort is directed from the inward to the outward world. From time to time, others have risen to defend commitment, engagement, and involvement. But at least until recently, the predominant demand in this century has been for some sort of objectivity.
It is interesting that in our minds, we keep thinking of the vacuum discovery like it's the Holy Grail. But there are a couple of shortcuts here that I'd like to unpack. I'm not a doctor, I'm just a consultant. My clients focus on healthcare, biopharma companies, providers, global health, institutions, and they've educated me. We need to find the tools to fight COVID, and we need to make them accessible to all. In search of lessons to apply in our own careers, we often try to emulate what effective leaders do. Roger Martin says this focus is misplaced because moves that work in one context may make little sense in another. A more productive, though more difficult approach is to look at how such leaders think. After extensive interviews with more than 50 of them, the author discovered that most are integrative thinkers. That is, they can hold in their heads two opposing ideas at once and then come up with a new idea that contains elements of each but is superior to both.
Ponzi is infamous. His original scheme was based on the legitimate arbitrage of international reply coupons for postage stamps, but he soon began diverting new investors' money to make payments to earlier investors as interest.
People modify cultural ideas in their minds, and sometimes they pass on the modified versions. Inevitably, there are unintentional modifications as well, partly because of straightforward error, and partly because inexplicit ideas are hard to convey accurately. There is no way to download them directly from one brain to another like computer programs, and even native speakers of a language will not give identical definitions of every word. So it can be only rarely, if ever, that two people hold precisely the same cultural idea in their minds. That is why, when the founder of a political or philosophical movement or a religion dies, or even before, schisms typically happen. The movement's most devoted followers are often shocked to discover that they disagree about what its doctrines really are.
The environmental impact of the global textile industry is hard to overstate. 1/3 of the water used worldwide is spent fashioning fabrics. For every ton of cloth produced, 200 tons of water is polluted with chemicals and heavy metals. An estimated 1 trillion kilowatt hours of electricity powers the factories that card and comb, spin and weave, and cut and stitch materials into everything from t-shirts to towels, leaving behind mountains of solid waste and a massive carbon footprint. Where the industry is today is not really sustainable for the long term, says Shreyaska Chaudhry, chief executive of Pratibha Syntex, a textile manufacturer based outside Indore, India. With something of an "if you build it, they will come" attitude, Mr. Chaudhry has steered Pratibha toward the leading edge of eco-friendly textile production. Under his direction, Pratibha began making clothes with organic cotton in 1999. Initially, the company couldn't find enough organic farms growing cotton in central India to supply its factories. To meet production demands, Chaudhry's team had to convince conventional cotton farmers to change their growing methods. Pratibha provided seeds, cultivation instruction, and a guarantee of fair trade prices for their crops. Today, Pratibha has a network of 28,000 organic cotton growers across the central states of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Orissa.
The sun provides the primary source of energy driving Earth's climate system, but it's variations have played very little role in the climate changes observed in recent decades. Direct satellite measurements since the late 1970s show no net increase in the sun's output, while at the same time, global surface temperatures have increased.
Marriage is a big step in anyone's life, and there is an argument to be made against getting married too early. As any newlywed couple knows, there is a huge amount of financial pressure associated with marriage. Firstly, the wedding reception and honeymoon cost you an arm and a leg. Then there's the matter of home loans, rent, and energy bills. If you're looking to start a family, your child's education is another thing you need to save up for. Teenagers should probably find a proper job before deciding to tie the knot.
Many utopias have been dreamed up through the ages. From Plato's Republic to Thomas More's Utopia and beyond, serious thinkers have envisioned societies where people live in peace and harmony. Most of these imaginary worlds have things in common. Everybody is equal and plays a part in the running of the society. Nobody goes without the essentials of life. People live mostly off the land. Often there is no money, and so on. Another thing they have in common is that, to the average person, they appear distasteful or unworkable since they do not take into account ordinary human nature or feelings. Architects have got in on the act too. After the Great Fire of London, Christopher Wren drew up plans for a reconstruction of the whole city, including precise street widths. And in the 20th century, there was Le Corbusier's Radiant City, in which, if you weren't in a car or didn't have one, life would have been a nightmare. Also in the 20th century, another famous architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, dreamed up a perfect city that got no further than the drawing board. Wright believed that what was wrong with modern cities was, in his words, rent. Ideas, land, even money itself, had to be paid for. He saw this as a form of slavery, and believed that modern city dwellers had no sense of themselves as productive individuals. Thus, Wright's city was to be made up of numerous individual homesteads, and the houses themselves were to be simple, functional, and in harmony with the environment. Everyone would own enough land to grow food for himself and his family. No outsiders would be allowed to come between the citizen and what he produced, or to exploit both for money. Goods and services would all be exchanged, not bought and sold for profit.
Giant exoplanets like the so-called hot Jupiters that are similar in characteristics to the solar system's biggest planet and orbit, very close to their host stars, are excellent targets for astronomers in their search for their extrasolar worlds. The size and proximity of these planets is easy to detect as they create a large decrease in brightness when passing in front of their parent stars. To qualify as a conservancy, a committee must define the conservancy's boundary, elect a representative conservancy committee, negotiate a legal constitution, prove the committee's ability to manage funds and produce an acceptable plan for equitable distribution of wildlife-related benefits. Once approved, registered conservancies acquire the rights to a sustainable wildlife quota set by the ministry. A letter from a mother to school officials because her son was sick at home, and she explained his illness to them, saying she did not want his son to spread the disease to other children. She hoped that the authorities would be able to pass on lessons to his son during this period.
According to a research conducted by Cambridge University, flowers can find their own ways to attract insects to help them pollinate. Flowers will release an irresistible smell. A scientist and her colleagues did an experiment in which they used fake flowers to attract bees and insects. In their experiments, they freed many bumblebees from their origins repeatedly and got the same results.
The ruins of the South Fremantle Power Station have stood empty since 1985, home only to urban explorers and street artists. Opened in 1951, the power station was once a pillar of progress for the expanding energy demands of Perth. Here it stood proud and strong for 34 years, supplying energy to its surrounding metropolis until 1985, when it was deemed to no longer be worth the money. The doors were shuttered, and the plant's 4TL chimney stacks were demolished, leaving the rest of the plant to rot by the sea.
Modern wealth has been created mainly through the action of market forces, which now dominate the whole of the industrial world. It is based on the false premise that we all start at an equal point. Of course, nobody starts at the same point. Market forces help a few to become very wealthy at the expense of the many who become poorer. This is taking place all over the world. There is an increasing number of hungry and desperate people living in utter poverty. Yet there are millionaires of all nationalities throughout the developed world. Market forces are inevitably acting to divide our world because they separate one section of society from another. Strangely enough, to create a society based on the free play of market forces, there must be a very strict control over the economy to ensure business efficiency. This is the poison of commercialization. It imposes restrictions on the natural needs of society. When the politicians are not meeting the needs of society, the people revolt. When the people's voice is not heard, there will inevitably be revolution. Part of that revolution is the growing crime rate and the violent street protests, which are the result of the imbalance of our society, too great wealth side by side with too great poverty.
We don't have any databases on this sort of information. As well as that, these records of sound levels take no account of the fact that people vary in their perceptions of noise. So someone like me with years of working in acoustics might be very different from you in that regard. But anyway, even though these noise maps are fairly crude, they've been useful in providing information and raising awareness. That noise matters. We need to deal with it, and so it's a political matter. And that's important. We need rules and regulations, because noise can cause all sorts of problems. Those of you who are city dwellers know that things go on 24 hours a day.
A big rise in state schools rated among the best institutions in the country is revealed in the latest edition of the Good Schools Guide. Middle-class parents facing financial pressures in the downturn are increasingly looking beyond the private sector to educate their children. The 23-year-old Good Schools Guide, a popular reference book for fee-paying families set on the best private school, has increased the number of state schools in this year's edition to 251, pushing the figure to more than a quarter of its 1,000 entries for the first time. And explaining why the guide has more than doubled the number of schools it features outside the private sector in only 5 years, Sue Fieldman, regional editor, told the Financial Times, "The parents we speak to want more information on the state sector and the best it has to offer."
Don't allow yourself to slip into self-defeating habits, such as procrastinating. Try to keep a momentum going in your study. Scatter blocks of study with short breaks to limit fatigue. If you study solidly for a couple of hours, make sure you give yourself 15 minutes or so before you start up again. Think positively about yourself and your situation. Challenge the negative thoughts that creep into your mind and cause you unnecessary stress at times, such as "I'm going to fail," I'll end up blowing my future, my change of getting a career. You don't have any need to think catastrophically. It's not achieving anything. In fact, it's doing you a lot more harm than good, because it's distracting you away from what you need to do. Learn to become more relaxed in your daily life. There are simple techniques, such as breathing exercises and progressive muscular relaxation exercises, as well as guided imagery, which can help you to feel calmer and more focused. The Macquarie University counselors can help you with these techniques. Some do relaxation tapes for students.
The transitions which occurred in Britain around 100 BC and after 43 AD, when the Roman army invaded Britain, represent the key points of socio-economic trend in Britain's past. During the 1st century BC, the traditional communal form of life shifted rapidly to a world where certain individuals become more important. During the 1st century AD, Britain became fully a part of the Roman Empire. Insects walk on water, snakes slither, and fish swim. Animals move with astounding grace, speed, and versatility. How do they do it? And what can we learn from them? How to walk on water and climb up. Walls takes readers on a wondrous journey into the world of animal motion. From basement labs at MIT to the rainforests of Panama, David Hugh shows how animals have adapted and evolved to traverse their environments, taking advantage of physical laws with results that are startling and ingenious. An individual's propensity to take risks is influenced by their own experience and that of others. The key reason in risk-taking is the balancing of perceptions of the risk and the possible utility rewards, and this balance may be a reflection or an individual's particular type of personality.
Our studies showed that those people on a higher protein diet lost the same amount of weight as those on a higher carbohydrate diet, since the two diets offered an equal amount of kilojoules and the same amount of fat. However, body composition, that is, the ratio of fat to muscle, showed greater improvement among those people on the higher protein diet. When the participants in our studies were allowed to eat until they were no longer hungry, those on the higher protein diet lost more weight than those on the higher carbohydrate diet, even after more than a year. The reduction in hunger and the beneficial effect on muscle provided by the higher protein diet is mostly related to its protein content. The diet is healthy because its protein comes from lean red meat, fish, chicken, and low-fat dairy products, all of which provide good nutrition. A high-protein diet in which the protein comes from protein powders and supplements is unlikely to be healthy unless the supplements are fortified with vitamins and minerals.
Rudman looks at how a poor understanding of maths has led historians to false conclusions about the mathematical sophistication of early societies. Rudman's final observation, that ancient Greece enjoyed unrivaled progress in the subject while failing to teach it at school, leads to a radical punchline. Mathematics could be better learned after we leave school.
One of the most popular forms of theatre is musical. Combining drama, dance, and music, the musical has been around for over a century, and in that time has kept pace with changing tastes and social conditions, as well as advances in theatre technology. Many modern musicals are known for their spectacular sets, lighting, and other effects.
Of the world's 7 remaining species of marine turtles, almost all have been pushed to endangered levels. Hunting, habitat loss, plastics pollution, climate change, and accidentally being caught in fishing nets continue to threaten the existence of these large and long-living creatures. Shell Beach, named after the shells that form its 90-mile extent, is a vital nesting ground for 4 of these marine turtle species. Critical thinking involves looking at something you may have seen many times and examining it from many different angles and perspectives. It involves going beyond the obvious or beyond easy to seek new understanding and rare solutions. It involves looking at common issues with uncommon eyes, known problems with new skepticism, everyday conflicts with probing, curiosity, and daily challenges with greater attention to detail. What can computer science tell us about what biological systems do and how they do it? Can these chemical information processing functions be replicated in digital computing systems? What are the implications of developments in computer science in understanding the nature of causality? Aaron Sloman, author of Computer Revolution in Philosophy, delves into the world of connections between ideas developed in computer science, biology, and philosophy, providing new insights into some fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and free will.
All kinds of predictions may be about to get even more difficult thanks to climate change. Though no one is sure exactly what its effects will be, it seems that extreme weather conditions, such as storms and hurricanes, are likely to become more common. Such events have far-reaching effects on distant weather systems, making general forecasting much harder. Because of the instructional methods, expected class participation, and the nature of the courses vary, no fixed number of absences is applicable to all situations. Each instructor is responsible for making clear to the class at the beginning of the semester his or her policies and procedures in regard to class, attendance, and the reasons for them.
The wool market was extremely important to the English medieval economy, and wool dominated the English export trade from the late 13th century to its decline in the late 15th century. Wool was at the forefront of the establishment of England as a European political and economic power, and this volume is the first study of the medieval wool market in over 20 years. It investigates in detail the scale and scope of advance contracts for the sale of wool. The majority of these agreements were formed between English monasteries and Italian merchants, and the book focuses on the data contained within them. The pricing structures and market efficiency of the agreements are examined, employing practices from modern finance. Ice storm is a type of weather. Cold rain falls down into the cold air, changing from water into ice. A heavy ice storm left more than 100 residents' electricity cut off because the ice storm hit down the wire.
What is music? In one sense, this is an easy question. Even the least musical among us can recognize pieces of music when we hear them and name a few canonical examples. We know there are different kinds of music, and even if our knowledge of music is restricted, we know which kinds we like and which kinds we do not.
The exponential growth of the internet was heralded in the 1990s as revolutionizing the production and dissemination of information. Some people saw the internet as a means of democratizing access to knowledge. For people concerned with African development, it seemed to offer the possibility of leapfrogging over the technology gap that separates Africa from advanced industrialized countries.
Private schools in the UK are redoubling their marketing efforts to foreigners. Almost a third of the 68,000 boarding pupils at such schools already come from overseas. But now, with many UK residents unwilling or unable to afford the fees and a cultural shift away from boarding, many schools are looking abroad to survive. Overseas students now account for about 500 meters of fee income a year for boarding schools in the UK.
Omniscience may be a foible of men, but it is not so of books. Knowledge, as Johnson said, is of two kinds. You may know a thing yourself, and you may know where to find it. Now, the amount which you may know yourself must, at its best, be limited. But what you may know of the sources of information may, with proper training, become almost boundless. And here come the value and use of reference books, the working of one book in connection with another, and applying your intelligence to both. By this means we get as near to that omniscient volume which tells everything as ever we should'll get. And although the single volume or work which tells everything does not exist, there is a vast number of reference books in existence, knowledge and proper use of which is essential to every intelligent person. Necessary as I believe reference books to be, they can easily be made to be contributory to idleness, and too mechanical a use should not be made of them.
The Roman people had at first been inclined to regard the French Revolution with either indifference or derision, but as the months went by and the émigrés who remained in the city were less and less hopeful of an early return home, the mood of the Romans became increasingly antagonistic towards the assassins of Paris. The nationalization of church property in France, the confiscation of papal territories, the dwindling of contributions, and the paucity of tourists and pilgrims all contributed to an exacerbation of this antagonism. When the French Convention, determined to gain international recognition for the Republic, dispatched envoys to Rome, the people turned upon them in a fury.
Daniel Harris, a scholar of consumption and style, has observed that until photography finally supplanted illustration as the primary means of advertising clothing in the 1950s, glamour inhered less in the face of the drawing, which was by necessity schematic and generalized, than in the sketch's attitude, posture, and gestures, especially in the strangely dainty positions of the hands. Glamour once resided so emphatically in the stance of the model that the faces in the illustrations cannot be said to have expressions at all, but angles or tilts, the chin raised upwards in a haughty look, the eyes lowered in an attitude of introspection, the head cocked at an inquisitive or coquettish angle, or the profile presented in sharp outline, emanating power, the severity like an emperor's bust, embossed on a Roman coin.
Coral reefs support more marine life than any other ocean ecosystem and are not, surprisingly, a favorite pursuit for many divers. But as well as being physically and biologically spectacular, coral reefs also support the livelihoods of over 500 million people. What is more, this number is expected to double in the coming decades, while the area of the high-quality reef is expected to halve. In combination with the very real threat of climate change, which could lead to increased seawater temperatures and ocean acidification, we start to arrive at some quite frightening scenarios.
Can dogs tell when we are happy, sad, or angry? As a dog owner, I feel confident, not only that I can tell what kind of emotional state my pets are in, but also that they respond to my emotions. Yet as a hard-headed scientist, I try to take a more rational and pragmatic view. These personal observations seem more likely to result from my desire for a good relationship with my dogs.
Chaucer's tales quickly spread throughout England in the early 15th century. Scholars feel the Canterbury Tales reached their instant and continued success because of their accurate and oftentimes vivid portrayal of human nature, unchanged through 600 years since Chaucer's time. George Macy, founder of the Limited Editions Club, wrote on the Canterbury Tales.
An important corollary of this focus on language as the window to legal epistemology is the central role of discourse to law and other socio-cultural processes. In particular, the ideas that people hold about how language works, linguistic ideologies, combine with linguistic structuring to create powerful, often unconscious effects. In recent years, linguistic anthropologists have made much progress in developing more precisely analytic tools for tracking those effects. Volcanoes blast more than 100 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year, but the gas is usually harmless. When a volcano erupts, carbon dioxide spreads out into the atmosphere and isn't concentrated in one spot. But sometimes the gas gets trapped underground under enormous pressure. If it escapes to the surface in a dense cloud, it can push out oxygen-rich air and become deadly.
Education and well-being have often been associated. The idea that education can promote individual well-being indirectly by improving earnings and promoting social mobility is an old one. So are notions of education helping to promote the good society by contributing to economic growth and equality of opportunity. More than simply putting flowers in a container, Ikebana is a disciplined art form in which nature and humanity are brought together. Contrary to the idea of a particolored or multicolored arrangement of blossoms, Ikebana often emphasizes other areas of the plant, such as its stems and leaves, and emphasizes the shape, line, and form. Though Ikebana is an expression of creativity, certain rules govern its form. The artist's intention behind each arrangement is shown through a piece's color, combinations, natural shapes, graceful lines, and the implied meaning of the arrangement. In geologic terms, a plate is a large, rigid slab of solid rock. The word tectonics comes from the Greek root, to build. Putting these two words together, we get the term plate tectonics, which refers to how the Earth's surface is built of plates. The theory of plate tectonics states that the Earth's outermost layer is fragmented into a dozen or larger and SMO plates that are moving relative to one another.
How is plagiarism detected? It is usually easy for lecturers to identify plagiarism within students' work. The university also actively investigates plagiarism in students' assessed work through electronic detection software called Turnitin. This software compares students' work against text on the internet, in journal articles and within previously submitted work from LSBU and other institutions, and highlights any matches it finds.
You can study anywhere. Obviously, some places are better than others. Libraries, study lounges, or private rooms are best. Above all, the place you choose to study should not be distracting. Distractions can build up, and the first thing you know, you're out of time and out of luck. Make choosing a good physical environment a part of your study habits.
Sports women's records are important and need to be preserved. And if the paper records don't exist, we need to get out and start interviewing people, not to put too fine a point on it, while we still have a chance. After all, if the records aren't kept in some form or another, then the stories are lost too. Considering their lingering reputation as man-killers, it's hardly surprising that hackles are raised any time someone brings up the idea of reintroducing wolves to the Scottish Highlands. Debate on this topic has been raging for years. Proponents would like to see the Highland environment return to its natural state. Opponents cite the animal's propensity for killing livestock. Recommended energy intakes are difficult to calculate even among individuals of the same age, sex, weight, height, and general pattern of activity. Therefore, the energy requirement for healthy people is often expressed as the amount of energy needed to maintain the status quo.
First, new ideas are the wheels of progress. Without them, stagnation reigns. Whether you're a designer dreaming of another world, an engineer working on a new kind of structure, an executive charged with developing a fresh business concept, an advertiser seeking a breakthrough way to sell your product, a fifth-grade teacher trying to plan a memorable school assembly program, or a volunteer looking for a new way to sell the same old raffle tickets, your ability to generate good ideas is critical to your success.
It is important to keep the quantities here in perspective. The volume of radioactive waste is very small, even smaller if the used material is chemically reprocessed, but it has to be managed carefully. Most countries accept that they are responsible for their own, and a number including France, Sweden, Finland, Korea, and the USA are now constructing facilities, which will eventually be deep geological repositories.
To invest, you need to draw up a clear plan. Do your own research, build in a margin of safety by always thinking about the valuation, and ultimately, be patient. By all means, include some speculative picks if you wish, but ensure they are only a small part of your portfolio. Looking for an oil explorer whose shares double, treble, and double again is exciting, but such firms are very rare. There are a lot more which have a consistent record of paying out the dividends which really make the markets work for you once they are reinvested.
Participating regularly in physical activity has been shown to benefit an individual's health and well-being. Regular physical activity is important in reducing the risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease and stroke, obesity, diabetes, and some forms of cancer. The National Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults Recommend at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, preferably every day of the week, to obtain health benefits.
Some students say that they need complete quiet to read and study. Others study best in a crowded, noisy room because the noise actually helps them concentrate. Some students like quiet music playing, others do not. The point is, you should know the level of noise that is optimal for your own studying. However, one general rule for all students is that the television seems to be more of a distraction than music or other background noise. So, leave the TV off when you're reading or studying. Also, don't let yourself become distracted by computer games, email, or internet surfing.
The American people. Creating a Nation and a Society, Concise Edition examines U.S. history as revealed through the experiences of diverse Americans, both ordinary and extraordinary. With a thought-provoking and rich presentation, the authors explore the complex lives of Americans of all national origins and cultural backgrounds, at all levels of society, and in all regions of the country.
In the preceding 100 years, Paris had been center stage for political and social movements that had deeply affected all of Europe. The many ways in which tradition had already been challenged and shaken during those years helped make it easier for those to achieve a break with tradition art.
Fingerprints, referred to as finger marks in forensics, are formed when residue from the ridged skin of the fingers or palms is transferred onto a surface, leaving behind an impression. Finger marks are often made of sweat and colorless, contaminating materials such as soap, moisturizer, and grease. These finger marks are described as latent as they are generally invisible to the naked eye, which means that locating them at a crime scene can be challenging.
According to traditional stereotypes, men make things and women clean or take care of people. Men were traditionally expected to become engineers, doctors, and mechanics, whereas women were sent to work as cooks, cleaners, and carers. These days, both men and women should have the opportunity to do any job they desire. But do they? It is still true that very few women are engineers, but in the UK the number of male and female doctors is the same, and currently more women are studying medicine at university. In addition, because of the high unemployment that exists in many countries right now, more men are choosing jobs that are traditionally female. They are working in kindergartens or primary schools, and more are training to be nurses, or primary schools, and more are training to be nurses. Of course, women traditionally stay at home and look after the children, but these days men are doing it too, either because they want to or because their wives have more secure jobs. William Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, allegedly on April 23, 1564. William, according to the church register, was the third of 8 children in the Shakespeare household, 3 of whom died in childhood. John Shakespeare had a remarkable run of success as a merchant, alderman, and high bailiff of Stratford during William's early childhood. His fortunes declined, however, in the late 1570s.
Folklore is a modern term for the body of traditional customs, superstitions, stories, dances, and songs that have been adopted and maintained within a given along with folk songs and folk tales. This broad category of cultural forms embraces all kinds of legends, riddles, jokes, proverbs, games, charms, omens, spells, and rituals especially those of pre-literate societies or social classes. Those forms of verbal expression that are handed on from one generation or locality to the next by word of mouth are said to constitute an oral tradition.
Top US business schools are recruiting younger, less experienced candidates in an effort to boost applications and head off competition for the best students from other graduate programs such as law and public policy. In an attempt to lure new students, leading business schools including Harvard, Stanford, the University of Chicago, and Wharton have moved away from the unofficial admissions prerequisite of 4 years work experience and instead have set their sights on recent college graduates and so-called early career professionals with only a couple years of work under their belt.
What is a country, and how is a country defined? When people ask how many countries there are in the world, they expect a simple answer. After all, we've explored the whole planet. We have international travel, satellite navigation, and plenty of global organizations like the United Nations, so we should really know how many countries there are. However, the answer to the question varies according to whom you ask. Most people say there are 192 countries, but others point out that there could be more like 260 of them. So why isn't there a straightforward answer? The problem arises because there isn't a universally agreed definition of country, and because, for political reasons, some countries find it convenient to recognize or not recognize other countries.
In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more and more like the job of chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physicians' practices don't just need to know medicine. They must also be able to balance budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions.
The first section of the book covers new modes of assessment. In Chapter 1, Kimball, Goldsmith College, London, responds to criticisms of design programs as formalistic and conventional, stating that a focus on risk-taking rather than hard work in design innovation is equally problematic. His research contains 3 parts that include preliminary exploration of design innovation qualities, investigation of resulting classroom practices, and development of evidence-based assessment.
RAEC Gold Coast Zone Chairman John Newland said some southern suburbs were shaking off a poor reputation and experiencing gentrification as wealthier residents moved in and displaced people from lower income groups. I think suburbs such as Miami have become popular with people who previously would not have gone there, he said. They have come into their own with new restaurants and markets opening, which has also made them more attractive. Developers have cottoned on to the trend as well, with Sunland launching a $62 million development, Magnolia Residences, in Palm Beach.